We've been talking with Heidi Dennis, author of Hello Anxiety, a book that helps us to understand how to work with our anxiety versus fight it. And this is part 2 of that conversation as we continue the conversation talking about anxiety. Welcome to Hope and Recovery, a Fellowship Bible Celebrate Recovery podcast. This is a podcast that shares life-change stories, recovery topics to help us with our mental, emotional, spiritual, and relational health, all centered around the Beatitudes and Celebrate Recovery principles where Jesus helps us to face our hurts, our hang-ups, and our habits so that we can walk in that newness of life, to live in freedom the way He designed for us and died for us. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ. I struggle with drugs and alcohol and perfectionism. My name is Rodney. I'm the pastor and ministry leader at Fellowship Bible Church Celebrate Recovery in Rogers. And welcome back. It's so good to have you back. We had a great conversation in part 1 with Heidi, just talking about anxiety and kind of pinging off of her book. And excited for you to hear the last little bit of this conversation as we jump into part 2 of the conversation with Heidi Dennis, author of Hello Anxiety. A perceived threat. I love that. You're just kind of organizing it. Hey, you've done everything you can. You've got the 5 alarms set. Mm-hmm. You've done everything you can. And then at what point do you bring others into that?
Yeah.
Is there a vertical conversation with the Lord in that, or what's that look like?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think prayer is a great connection piece and source of regulation, you know? And so, I think that would be a great moment to, just pray like, God, don't let me miss my flight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Paul, take me there. You mentioned that, don't be anxious about anything. Mm-hmm. What is Paul saying there, right? When he says, don't be anxious about anything. So the believers, they're working their recovery, they're trying. What is he saying in that space when he says, don't be anxious about anything? How does that hit your heart?
Yeah.
In that?
For me, the focus is what he said to do with it. Present it, right? Yeah. This is something that's very important to you, so present it to God. This is something that you're worried about, so present it to God.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's interesting, even thinking, I think 2 chapters earlier, he's talking about sending his friend to another church. And he says, I'm sending him to you so that you will be glad and that I will have less anxiety.
Wow. I love that.
It's like, I thought you said don't be anxious.
Yeah.
But to your point, he's not saying you're not going to be anxious.
Right.
But what do you do with that?
What do you do with that?
I'm going to have anxiety, but what do I do with that? So what's the cost then, Heidi, if I'm not addressing my anxiety, I'm not listening to my body, I'm not organizing, as you just beautifully kind of painted that picture, what's the cost of that if I don't do that?
Yeah. I mean, I think it can range from, you're missing out on an opportunity for connection or reassurance, all the way to if you keep numbing it and keep distracting from it, it gets louder. It could even lead to more addiction. It can lead to self-destructive behaviors because you're trying so hard to not feel this thing. And of course we don't want to feel it. It's uncomfortable, right? It's uncomfortable, but, it's dangerous if we ignore it.
Yeah.
It truly is.
Yeah. Yeah. We're actually going against what our body was designed to do.
Right.
And so we have to go grasping for more things. So one of your chapters, and it just kind of hit me, it is entitled, When It Still Doesn't Seem to Hit. What does that mean? What do you mean by that?
Yeah. Well, another question, if you're kind of running through, like, is this a threat? What is this trying to tell me? And you can't figure out what's happening. Another question I like to ask myself is this a familiar feeling for me? When have I felt this before? And a lot of times anxiety can simply be triggered when it reminds us of something that was a threat. So maybe some past traumas coming up. And Rodney, I mean, you know, as well as I do as a counselor, anything can trigger that.
Yeah.
A time of year can trigger that.
Yep.
The weather, a smell, going into a certain house, you know, sometimes for some people walking into a certain church, you know, it can trigger
Hearing a song.
Yeah. You know, and so sometimes there might be some other reasons if we're curious enough that it might be hitting a block for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do we do with that? You know, if those triggers come up, what do you do with that? Kind of that same process, or what?
Yeah.
What's that look like?
I mean, if it's bringing up past trauma, the first, you know, tool that I usually reach for is grounding, you know, and kind of bringing it back to present of what's different now, reminding yourself you're not there, reminding yourself that, you know, telling your alarm system, hey, we don't need to be gearing up for a fight right now because we're no longer in that situation.
Yeah.
That was threatening. We're here, we're safe. We have these other tools. We have these other, hopefully, connection places, right? With people, with God. And so bringing it back to present. And then obviously, you know, if you're still struggling and your nervous system is still firing up, I mean, counseling, therapy, put a little plug in there. It's always a great resource.
Yeah. Yeah. And you talk about that in your book, just understanding when we need to pursue more help. And so you get into, in one of your chapters, knowing the difference between the real and perceived threats. So if you're speaking about those triggers, can you unpack that a little bit? How do I get to that place of knowing the difference between perceived and real threats when those triggers are popping up, for example, right?
Right.
Talk about that. I'd love to hear your heart on that.
Yeah. So when I feel like, you know, anxiety and my nervous system is gearing up for a fight, and I ask myself, is there a threat right now? Usually it's pretty clear whether or not there's an actual fight in front of us. You know, usually it's, you know, either, there's a fire in the house, or I got to jump out of the way of that car, or maybe even I'm in a conversation with somebody, right? That it's not a safe person for me, right?
Yeah.
Or I'm going into an environment that, you know, it's firing off. And so, you know, usually in those moments, you'll know it's when there's not a threat that it gets confusing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So how much, and I'd love to hear your wisdom on this, Heidi, we have this internal response happening. You're talking about the vagus nerve and just the internal response, feel it in my body, I'm organizing it, all that. How often do you see external circumstances play a part in my anxiety, right? So I have this internal response that I've really firmly believed that a lot of times is connected to my early years, what I learned about emotions, because I treat anxiety the way I do all my emotions, right?
Yeah.
But external circumstances and what's happening around me, in your experience, professionally and practically in your life, how much of the external, I'm thinking like caffeine, right?
Okay.
Too much caffeine that I'm drinking kind of thing.
Yeah.
I know that sounds crazy, but I feel anxious, right? I feel my heart rapidly going. And so how much of that does that play into that, where maybe it's just some external things that I am in control of? And is that making sense? Kind of how much of that is things that I do have control over versus what I don't have control over, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I mean, you know, we really, if we narrow it down, all we have control over are our choices and our reactions.
Yeah.
And so if you can kind of lean into, okay, is there anything I can control? Is there any way that I'm reacting to this situation that is, you know, am I pumping myself with too much caffeine? I've kind of had an epiphany that sometimes if I'm moving too fast or I'm jumping from thing to thing too quickly without giving myself time to transition, it cues my nervous system to give me an anxious response, because it's like, oh, Heidi's in a hurry.
Yeah.
Well, let's pump her oxygen and let's pump that hard and let's, you know, pump her full of adrenaline. And so she can move faster, because obviously she's really needing to get somewhere.
Yeah.
And most of the time I'm not, Rodney. Most of the time I'm just, moving too quickly.
Right.
Yeah. And that's well within my control, just to slow down, kind of take a nice little breath, maybe take a little stretch before I jump to the next thing.
Yeah. So my calendar too, I mean, how much I'm packing that sounds like,
Yes.
am I packing it just back to back too much stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. You can kind of hear by these examples how intuitive our nervous system is, how God created that it's just watching and seeing, okay, what is Rodney needing? And a lot of time, bless its heart, as we like to say in the South, bless its heart. It's not really offering us exactly what we need. It's just responding to the signals that we're giving it of, oh, I'm in a hurry, or I'm jumping to this next thing, or, oh, I've got a lot of things to do today, and packing it too full. So it's like, okay, we'll give you all the tools that you need to do all those things then and juggle it all.
Yeah.
Well,
I love that. I love that lens that you're painting there. It's like, what do you need right now? And it may be you just need to take a breath and rest.
Yes.
You're going too fast. You're going too hard. You're not designed to go 100 miles per hour. And I even think about the things that we consume in our mind, right? I've talked about that before, but the 24-hour day news was not designed to watch 24 hours a day.
No.
It's designed to pop in, get an update, and bounce out, right?
Yeah.
But we're going to take a quick break right here. Having a great conversation with Heidi Dennis, author of Hello Anxiety, and having a great conversation around anxiety. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation. Hey folks, if you're looking for a meeting near you, you can find a meeting every Friday night at Fellowship Fayetteville or Fellowship Rogers Celebrate Recovery. We meet at 6 p.m. for Connection Cafe meal, and then we have our general meeting that starts at 7 p.m. We meet every single Friday night. We'd love to have you join us. Go to fellowshipcr.org for more information. We hope to see you this Friday night. Bring a friend and come see us. But yeah, what am I feeding my brain, or what am I stimulating my brain? And we talk about in addictions, right? What is it that I'm feeding my brain? And is that adding to my anxiety, or is it taking away?
Right.
Kind of that speaks to that self-care, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So somebody is listening right now, Heidi, and they've been struggling with anxiety. Well, let me go here first. How do I know when I might need the extra resources, right? So sometimes medication is an option, right? So at what point do I want to kind of lean into that? And how do I know maybe I need some extra help? And is there shame in that? And how do I address the shame in that?
Yeah.
I'd love for you to speak.
How much time do we have? No, I think if you are working through all these, a lot of these tools that we talk about in the book and others that you have found useful, and you're not seeing the fruit, you're not seeing the benefit, and in fact, you're working so hard at using these tools that you are just exhausted.
Yeah.
Right. And you're thinking to yourself, man, I need some help. I need some help, whether that's I need, some counseling, or I do need some medication, and, I like to kind of try the counseling, and let's try the tools. Let's try the counseling.
For sure.
And if you're still wearing yourself out, hey, maybe we do need some medication, or if things are firing up so quickly that we need to have some extra support, then there is nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
There is no shame in reaching out for help. In fact, that's the number one thing that God's trying to tell us through our nervous system and our anxiety is reach out for help, reach out for connection. That's what it's all pointing to, Rodney.
Yeah.
That's what it's all pointing to.
Yeah. There's a longing for connection, for someone that will attune with my needs, to respond with care, compassion, be engaged with me in the process.
Yeah.
And allow space for those emotions where other settings may shame that, right? You shouldn't be feeling that. Sometimes that's the shame messages we tell ourselves.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I call that, right?
What's that?
I call it shoulding all over yourself.
Woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Yeah. I shouldn't be feeling this. I should be feeling that. Don't should all over yourself.
Yeah. I love that. I love, well, and that's true, right?
Right?
I mean, that speaks to, some of the core beliefs, trying to organize. Is there some thought patterns back to that? The emotions aren't lying. They're actually telling the truth. They're revealing what we're believing, right? So what am I believing right now? And is that accurate? And maybe it is, I've got to be perfect all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of hits my heart. That brings up anxiety to feel like I got to perform and never let anyone down.
Right.
Boy, that's going to trigger some anxiety
That will
in a hurry.
absolutely trigger some anxiety. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would you say to somebody that is listening? They're trying to figure this out. Maybe they've never been able to listen to their body, even slow down long enough to organize, like you painted that great picture for us. What would you say to them as they're in this early stages of just acknowledging, maybe I have anxiety? What would you say to them? They're listening. You're just talking directly to them. What would you say to them if they have a listening ear?
Yeah. I would say try to see your anxiety as a compassionate teacher. It's trying to teach you. It's trying to help you with something. So if you can just get curious about it, if you can just kind of sit there long enough with it and say, okay, what do you want me to know? God, what do you want me to know through this anxiety that I'm feeling? And just see where it leads you. Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting, just real kind of the physiological side. There's a cortisol, a high use of cortisol in my brain, right? And that's not healthy for me to have.
Stress hormone
right?
is no bueno sometimes.
Yeah. And so just that picture, and you're doing a great job kind of speaking to that, connecting with myself, connecting with God, connecting with others, and even inviting God into that, in my suffering, in my anxiety. God, how might you want to show me some kindness and care right now?
Yeah.
I need you. And how can I invite somebody else into that? Which is scary.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because what are they going to think of me, I'm guessing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Is that pretty common, the people coming into your office, some of those narratives that they're speaking about why they're not connecting and reaching out, or what do you see in your experience?
It's scary, right? I mean, you saw Jesus be let down, so it means you can also be let down sometimes. But also a lot of times you won't. A lot of times you'll find someone who says, me too. Me too. I feel that too. And man, there is nothing more powerful than knowing you're not alone in something.
Yeah, having somebody with us. I mean, that kind of that soothes that limbic system. Right? It's like, like I have a greater need in this space than I do to even think. And can you be with me in that?
Can you be with me in that?
And even just that picture with your son, just kind of being, I'm here, I got you, I'm with you. In that. Yeah. So final thoughts from you, just words of wisdom. I mean, there's so much that we could unpack in this book, and I can't wait to dive in deep with this. Hello, Anxiety, How to Find Peace by Changing Your Response to Anxiety by Heidi Dennis. You can get that on Amazon, probably other places that you buy your books. But final thoughts from you, Heidi. What would you say? Anything that you just would love to our listeners to hear, to bring encouragement or some hope?
We all have anxiety. Every single one of us has it, and thank God that we do, because it really is there to try to help us. And so, don't be afraid to listen. Don't be afraid to reach out.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I love what you do. I love your heart, love your wisdom.
Thank you.
And may have to get you to one of our leaders meetings so people can hear more from you. But the book is Hello, Anxiety, How to Find Peace by Changing Your Response to Anxiety by Heidi Dennis. She's a local counselor here in Northwest Arkansas. And just grateful for the impact that you have. Said it before, it's worth saying again. Appreciate the impact that you make on so many people's lives, and just grateful to know you. You're a good person. You're good people.
Likewise, you're good people as well.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of excitement around this book, and I hope it's doing well. I hope people are catching wind of what this is, and And we'll put it on our social media as well so people can find this as a resource. So
Yeah.
Heidi, thanks for being here today. Grateful for you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for a good conversation. And hopefully this has been beneficial for you, that you find some hope in this space. I love the way Heidi said it, that we all struggle with anxiety. It's what do we do with that? Do we shame it? Do we fight it? Or do we work with it, as her book goes into? And I want to encourage you, don't try to face this alone. If those shame messages, anxiety is conflicting with your belief system, just lean into that and honor that. What is my body trying to tell me? What is the need I have right now? And it's rooted in connection with God, others, and even ourselves, to kind of honor that space. So hopefully that brings some hope and encouragement for you. Go check out her book, Hello Anxiety, How to Find Peace by Changing Your Response to Anxiety by Heidi Dennis. It will bless your heart, and I hope it will be a good resource to add to your library. Hey, thanks so much for being with us today. I hope you'll join me next time. Until then, God bless.